Also today, the IEC holding a media briefing saying that it's ready for the voter registration this weekend. But of course, we know that time is tight. The registration weekend starting Saturday and Sunday. After that, the candidate list needs to be finalised, and only then can ballot papers start being printed. Let's discuss this and other issues now with Lulu, founder and CEO of the Elections Management Consulting Agency of Africa. Thank you so much for your time. Very interesting what Freedom Under Law is saying, and if I'm not mistaken, it holds with what you've been saying to us as well, that in fact the IEC may have indeed got it right. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I'm actually quite happy to hear that somebody else actually also agrees with the decision of the IEC. The IEC has been under a lot of persecution ever since the announcement of the new election timetable. But the previous speaker is actually quite correct. The election timetable has been followed to the T. There's nothing that the IEC, once again I reiterate, there's nothing wrong that the IEC has done in regard to ensuring a fair and an equitable process for everybody that is involved for this particular election.
We've also seen DA Federal Chair Helen Zille, suggesting that the IEC is captured, even before the Constitutional Court made its decision, when the ANC stopped their court process around the party list. She said, oh, that's possibly a sign that they've got wind of the Constitutional Court's decision, that it would go in the ANC's favour. As it happened, it actually hasn't gone in the ANC's favour, but she's still saying, well, they must have known they'd have this gap to reopen the window. The IEC did respond to questions around that today, and it seems they're not going to get into sort of a public slanging match, but are rather going to allow the process to unfold in court with the DA challenging that. Also, would you say that's the right decision?
I think it is it's a perfect decision, actually. The IEC at the moment is not in a position to go into a mudslinging contest with any political party. For that matter, if it actually gets into a media boxing ring with the DA, it only emphasizes what the opinion of the DA is, as far as the IEC is actually concerned. So it's a very good decision that they have taken, that let the matter play out in court, and the IEC will obviously abide by the decision of the court at the end of the day. So it's a very good decision on their part. I do think that it's quite mischievous of the DA to actually imply that our judicial system is actually that weak, that it would actually compromise the value, we would compromise the value of justice all in the interest of just one political party. I think that says a lot about the Democratic Alliance as a political party, and specifically about Helen Zille as the leader of the opposition.
Let's talk about voter registration weekend. From the voters' perspective, it's like our last chance to check we're on the voters' roll, that we're still registered, or to register if we haven't ever done so before. Behind the scenes, what does it actually mean for the IEC? Is this really their last chance to finalise the voters' roll? Talk to me about that part of the process.
All right. In my understanding, after the voter registration weekend, the IEC has up until the 20th of September in which to proclaim the election. If you remember, when we had a discussion about it last week, we said that only when an election is proclaimed, when the Minister of Copter announces the date of the election, proclaims that date in the government gazette, does the voters' roll close. So once the voter registration weekend happens, the uploading, the verification, and also the inspection of the voters' roll takes place. Once that happens, then the IEC and then the minister then proclaims that election, then the voters' roll will be closed, meaning that after the 20th, people will not be able to go and register to vote or to update their voter registration status. They have up until the 20th, literally. The voter registration weekend is just for people to go on a massive drive and just to remind people that actually this is the process that they need to go to. But the voters' roll remains open up until the 20th of September.
All right, so that's the voters' roll. The ANC, we know, is having lots of meetings to try and sort out its candidate list. They've given themselves a deadline until Tuesday the 21st. Is there actually a deadline at the moment from the IEC on when political parties have to submit their candidate list by?
There is I think in the outline that they presented last week, the IEC presented that the 22nd of September is the final date in which political parties can submit their candidates' lists.
All right, so that has to happen.
So political parties, in my understanding, have up until the 22nd of September at 5 o'clock to ensure that they've submitted their candidates for this particular local government elections.
All right, so that'll be next Wednesday. And the reason I'm doing all these deadline questions to you is that I remember our last conversation where I think you said it's going to take between 6 and 8 weeks to print out all the ballot papers, and that they're so complicated because it's a municipal election and everything is different and the candidates are different depending on the municipality. Wednesday next week is actually less than 6 weeks to the election. Do you think they're going to get it done on time?
I have said that I am biased. The IEC has known to be miracle workers before. I have my complete faith in the fact that they will be able to get it done on time. They will get it on time. I believe that they will be able to do it. I would expect at this point the IEC would rely on service providers that they've used in the past, service providers that they've got a trust with. So it is my belief that they will call upon those particular services that they've used over the years, and they will double up their printing time.
Yeah, and I would imagine they start printing as soon as possible, then they start checking those to make sure that everything's in place and ready to go on the 1st of November. Some interesting issues came up at the IEC briefing today. The issue of cyber safety was also raised, and I'm wondering if that's perhaps after what we've seen has happened with the Department of Justice, where they were targeted by a ransomware attack, and it's really had quite a significant impact. It seems that they're fairly confident, but I would imagine it is an absolute massive IT network. You know, the IEC system must be heavily dependent on technology.
I would imagine that they are. The IEC has always prided itself as being an organization that was ahead of its time. It's always been ahead of its time in terms of their systems. It's always been ahead of its time in terms of being able to anticipate what would be coming in the market. I mean, that's why the IEC is a benchmark for the African continent's electoral elections management bodies. So you then can imagine that there's a lot of these things that the IEC would have anticipated, even if they perhaps did not do a full rollout on the IT systems that one would anticipate that they would have. But I believe that the IEC is ahead of its time. I believe that, I don't speak on their behalf, obviously. I'm certain that their IT personnel would be able to give more background and information on this. With the candidate nomination that was, one got the impression that a lot of other political parties do not have challenges as others did. So that in itself shows you the capacity of the IEC. You've got an elections results system that the IEC, it has never failed in the years that we've started going to the election results center. We've never heard of any time where the IEC systems had crashed or anything. So one gets the confidence that actually the particular systems that they're working with, even for this particular election, are ready to service the country.
You know, I remember when the first briefing was held, they did speak about special votes. And this is an interesting one. And we heard today from Masego Ratlaga, who was covering that briefing, that there are plans to go in full protective gear to people's homes who aren't mobile to allow them to place those special votes. But do you think that this is an opportunity for the IEC to broaden the category of special votes? You know, we see in America, people can do mail-in ballots, for example. Do you think that the time is right for us to be looking at whether we can vote online, especially if the IEC, as you say, has got such a great IT system? Is it time? Is the time now to be looking at it, or is it just, are the deadlines just too tight this year?
The deadlines are just too tight this year. If I'm not mistaken, the IEC has previously, with the UNDP, gone through situations where they've done feasible researches and studies to see whether the South African population would be welcome to the idea of voting electronically. And they received, you know, the report had a lot of mixed feelings, with young people opting and looking forward to having a facility like that, and older people basically feeling that they would not be comfortable in going for something like that. So I think if the country were, or if the IEC had to consider an electronic voting facility, it would be one where there would have been a thorough engagement, thorough training, because, you know, elections are a very sensitive issue in South Africa, or actually on the continent. You can imagine that going into an electronic voting device when you are still getting used to just being able to cast a physical ballot can be a bit more, can be a bit of a harrowing experience, especially for the older generation.
Yeah, good point. Thank you very much for chatting to us, Lulu White. She's the founder and CEO of the Elections Management Consulting Agency of Africa.